So good morning children, I'm just back with another video for you. Children, last day we had discussed the characteristic features of 1857's revolt, and now today we're just going to discuss, means in this video you will just learn three different topics. This is exactly from your textbook Kalyan Chaudhuri, page number 58. And the name of the topic is Nature of the Revolt of 1857. I repeat, Nature of the Revolt of 1857. The next topic is, this is very important for you children, for this especially, attitude of the educated Bengali society towards the revolt of 1857. And the last topic of the day is impact of the revolt of 1857 and Queen's proclamation as well. So I'm just going to repeat all the topics for today once again, and these are as follows. The first one is nature of the revolt of 1857. Number two, attitude of the Bengali society, educated Bengali society towards the revolt of 1857. And the last but not the least, that is impact of the revolt of 1857, Queen's proclamation. Before starting the video, I want to tell you children that a task was given by me, and the task was, I told you that internet or Google shows us that 1857's revolt was ultimately an unsuccessful movement for us, but being an Indian, I had just opposed that, because 1857's revolt was not an unsuccessful movement for the freedom struggle movement in Indian history. This was my perspective, this was my opinion, and I had also asked you, all of you, that please, if it's possible, send me a very short message or a short clip or a short video. So what means, for what you can just show, you can just argue that 1857's revolt was not ultimately an unsuccessful movement, but still. So let's begin our topic today, nature of the revolt of 1857. Last day when I just talked about the characteristic features of the revolt of 1857, this will be far more different from the characters of the revolt of 1857, like the nature, in which way we can just disseminate the ideas of the nature and the characteristic features of the 1857's revolt. Let's just read the first line. The nature of the revolt of 1857 is a very contentious issue, and debate over it started from the very moment of its happening. Contentious, like the controversial, having a very strong point to just defy. I mean, contentious issue. 1857, when it just occurred, obviously it occurred in the year of 1857, but still since that very day a debate had just aroused at the time, since that time, that what was the nature of the revolt of 1857. Most importantly children, you will just get astonished to know it, that different historians, it can be the Indian historians, it can be the Cambridge historians, it can be the Annals group, it can be the different groups, they had just determined in their own different ways to just describe the movement or the 1857's revolt nature. As because the problem for the first time arose when V.D. Savarkar, I mean Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, he for the first time urged that the 1857's revolt was the first war of independence, first Indian war of independence it was. And since that time the problem arose. Different historians from Indian side, also from the sides of Britain, from the sides of America, from different groups, they had just opposed, as because they are having different opinions. In this nature, we'll just highlight, we'll just learn that what were the points of discussions, what were the points of segregating matter on which they had just segregated, they had just opined in their own way. Let's read. Opinions are sharply divided as to whether the revolt of 1857 was mere mutiny or a war of independence. Mutiny, when it comes in our mind, it means that a resistance for the survival. Suppose I am being extorted, I am being just exploited by my neighbor or by my administrator. At the time, what can I do? I can just revolt. I can just resist. I just can revolt. I just can protest against that fact. But when it comes in our mind that revolt, you have to just think, you have to just determine that revolt does not come to an end within a very short and certain limitations or the consequences. It's having a great devastating long-lasting approach, long-lasting consequences on the society and the contemporary periods also. So that's why we should not call it a mutiny. 1857's mutiny or the mutiny of 1857, we should not call it mutiny. If you call it mutiny at the time, it means being an Indian, you're just going to humiliate our Indian freedom struggle movement, obviously the movement like 1857. So we will not call it 1857's mutiny or the Sepoy mutiny. Understood, children? Okay, so it can be a war of independence also. There is far more contentious issues or the what can I say, that the controversies are also there, that whether it should be called the first war of independence or not. Why it should not be called the first war of independence, I will just tell you shortly after the discussion. You will just come to know. Considered from the nature of the rising, the old school of historian found it difficult to call it war of independence on the following grounds. Why so? Why should the 1857's revolt not be called the first war of independence of India? The old school of historians, they have just opined in their own way. I have already told you, children, that different historians, different groups, different categories are having different problems, different opinions, different arguments, and forward they are just going to fix up their own clearance, their own opinions, and what are the points of conflicts, in which way they have just told, in which way, on what basis they have just given their instructions, they have just given their ideas and the opinions. Let's have a look. There was no definite political ideal before the rebels. Yes, surely there was no definite political ideal before the rebels. The rebels did not just set up a perfect and a prominent ideal in front of them, just like the French Revolution. In the French Revolution, all the common people, especially the peoples from the third estate, they had determined that the monarchical government should be abolished. The monarchical government should be just disbanded, should be just removed from their position. But here you can see that the different groups, different peoples, different sepoys, different regiments, they had just revolted against the British without having their own or prominent ideal or the leadership. Just for instance, when the movement it just sparked out, Berhampur, Murshidabad, the sepoys, the Indian regiment, the Indian sepoys, they were very much offended. They were very much disappointed with the idea of the Enfield rifle. They could not just accept the Enfield rifle, as because the paper cartridge of the Enfield rifle, it was made even though expulsion of the British was the immediate goal. Expulsion of the British was the immediate goal. What else you need? They were very much determined that they wanted to expel the British oppression, the British suppression from India permanently. What can be the more novel idea rather than this? The Indians, they had the idea to expel the government, to just remove the British administration, the British misrule from India permanently. But still the old school of historians, they are just still arguing that it should not be called the first war of independence. Why? So because they did not have any perfect plan, coordination with others. The leaders were not basically too much war oriented or task oriented. This is the reason. How can old school of historians, they can just predict, they can just say that this was not a first war of independence. It was, we should not just forget it, that this was the 1857's revolt and the year was 1857. During that time, the Indians were not well acquainted with the idea of revolt. The ideals of nationalism, the ideals of revolt, the ideals of resistance, all these things were not too much perfectly amalgamated with the Indians. It could not just go hand in hands with the Indians. So this was the problem of the Indians. They should just give the chance, they should just give the way to think that they could also just revolt against the British. But this was not happened. Okay, so there was no plan, no coordination among the rebels in different parts of the country. This is very true. I also just give my support to this sentence, as because there was no plan perfectly, means there is no shred of doubt that they did not have such kind of plan forward. They could just move forward, they could just suppress the British rule, they could just means overcome from the British administration and their obstructions. There was no perfect plan, no coordination. This was the most important fact. The no means coordination, there was the lack of coordination amongst the Indian sepoys. Even the fact, at least some of the zamindars and talukdars, they were also called the landed magnates, participated in the rebellion, would at best give a feudal character, as Jawaharlal Nehru pointed out, our first Prime Minister of independent India. Obviously he was Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. He had also opined that he had just noticed that the feudal response or the feudal character was there in the 1857's revolt. He just called it a feudal response, nothing more than that, as because the feudal lords, they had just become very much disappointed, discontented against the British rule and their misrule, as because I think you can just remember in the year of 1793, when the permanent settlement was introduced by Lord Cornwallis, the then governor of India, means the Governor General of India. He had just introduced a plan. There was the permanent settlement, and for what? By just implementing the sunset law, lots of zamindars and the landlords, they had just lost their proprietary rights, the landed property rights. So that's why they become the victim of the English East India Company and their means land policy. So that's why they had also supported, they had also just joined with the hands of the Indian sepoys, and finally they had just given a breakthrough for the smoothing, for the smooth going of the British administration and the governance. So that's why they had also just joined it. They had just also supported the Indian sepoys. And but what's the problem with that? They had supported. So what's the problem? Okay. Common people did not participate in any measure that can legitimately give it a name of a nationalizing. So the old school of historians, they are also just opining that the common peoples from different districts, from different parts of the country, even most of the part of the country or the Indian subcontinent, they did not join the Indian freedom struggle movement. I mean the 1857's revolt. Even in some cases, we could see that the intelligent Bengali intelligence or the educated middle class, they had just supported from the sides of the English East India Company, as because they were the beneficiaries, they were benefited with the English East India Company and their land policy. So that's why they couldn't just lose their own prestige and vanity from the sides of their own. So that's why ultimately it just went into ruin. So this is the most important point. You have to just write in your answer, if the question comes in your question paper, that the common people, the participation of common people, it was not very much spontaneous yet. The above context, the opinion of Professor Sushobhan Sarkar is very relevant. Please just to underline this sentence if you're having the book with you. He has developed that while many are prepared to notice national elements in the historic struggles of the Rajputs or in that of Maratha leader Shivaji, they failed to notice a similar motive behind the revolt of 1857. So Professor Sushobhan Sarkar, he has just clearly opined that the heroic struggles of the Rajputs or in that of Maratha leader Shivaji, they fail to notice a similar motive behind the revolt of 1857. So every single leader of 1857's revolt, they had been just diverted by their own ideas, by their own anticipation. Means they had supported, they had just given the leadership of 1857's revolt, but to just fulfill their own aspirations, to fulfill their own expectation, not to just give any kind of sympathy. They were not very much sympathetic towards the sepoys. Just for instance, take a look that Rani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi, she had just supported this movement to just get back her territory from the hands or the clutches of the English East India Company. This was the main fact. So we cannot just ignore this point also, that they were diverted by their own ideas and their own initiatives. Next, Professor S.N. Sen, Surendranath Sen, in his book entitled 1857, this is very important. In the test paper, you will just get the question several times that who was the author of the book 1857. It will be S.N. Sen. Concluded that the mutiny of 1857 was not simply a rising of the sepoys. He argued that a national rising does not require participation of all people. The line is very true. Exactly, I was talking about this thing from the very beginning of the topic discussing. I told that it's not compulsory. If you have noticed, if you have just read about the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution of 1917, you cannot tell me, you cannot just say that all the peoples from the common strata or the lower dignity or dogmatism, that all the peoples have participated in this movement. So if on that point of basis, if you are trying to say that all the peoples have not participated, they had not participated in this movement, it doesn't matter, as because this is not compulsory that all the peoples will just come and join hands with the rebels. They will just revolt against the British extortionists, because so many people were there, they did not know that how to revolt, how to react against the British imperialism, colonialism. So that's why they did not just join. But it doesn't mean that the revolt was not the first word of independence. So on that basis, we can just differ our opinion. He argued that a national rising does not require participation of all people. This is very true. I agree. As because only an influential section of people had participated in the revolution of France and America. Just like that, I have just given the glimpse of that history. Means the history of French, means the French Revolution and the American War of Independence. Obviously, the notice means only we could notice that very influential peoples like George Washington in America, American War of Independence, even Napoleon Bonaparte in French Revolution. So means how many common peoples they had just participated, as because they only need to just fill up their stomach, as because they have to means do very hard work to just fill up their stomach after the day. So that's why it can be an utopian idea, it can be an absolutely what can I say, that means a kind of mythical idea to them, so that they can just come forward, they can just join the movement. Yes, sometimes it happens that the common peoples, they become so angry, they become so violent. Without their participation, without their active participation, the movement cannot be just be successful. But still, if I just put a question in front of you, like Mohandas Gandhi, when he started the movement in India since 1917, though we all know that the first movement, all India-based movement that was started in the year of 1920, obviously there was the non-cooperation movement. Can you tell me, children, that how many peoples from the common peoples or the common strata or the common dogmatism they had just supported, they had just participated in this movement? Not everyone, na? This is the fact. Actually, what happened, na? Mohandas Gandhi was the first class leader of the INC or the Indian National Congress, but still he was unsuccessful. Yes, you were just listening correctly to me, that he was quite unsuccessful to just to make the India united one. It's very difficult, not only for the Indian subcontinent, it's very difficult to just unite all the peoples together. So this is the fact. Okay, Professor Ramesh Chandra Majumdar's arguments are also somewhat identical with those of Professor Sen. According to him, what began as a mutiny ended in certain areas in an outbreak of the civil population. So first of all, the Sepoy mutiny was started. It was merely a Sepoy mutiny, but finally when the common peoples, they had started, they had just come to join with this movement, the civilian movement or the civil movement was exactly started. There is, however, no dearth of the other opinions, as pointed out by Professor Shekhar Bandyopadhyay, V.D. Savarkar. I have already told that was the concept, was the identity of V.D. Savarkar. He for the first time just earned the epithet, that he for the first time told that 1857's revolt should be called the first war of independence, and since that time the problem arose. Okay. So, 1857 as the Indian War of Independence directly drafted it into the historiography of Indian nationalism. Though vigorously denied by the conservative school of historians, the opinion of Savarkar received support from Professor S.B. Chowdhury. Conservative groups, Conservative Society of the Indian School, Indian Historical School, they had just told that wish means should not just call it the first war of independence, but still it will no meant it will not be a very dramatical incident for us, so that we cannot tell it the first 1857's revolt was the first war of independence. Surely we can call it, we can say that 1857's revolt was the first war of independence. He saw the revolt of 1857 as the first combined attempt to many classes of people to challenge a foreign power. This was the very first time the Indians, whenever they did not have such kind of idea how to protest, how to revolt, but still they had just come from their own house, they had just joined their hands with another one, and finally they had just become in that context they become successful to just fight against the British. Though it was the movement, the revolt failed, but not entirely. The movement not failed entirely, as because after the ruthless suppression of 1857's revolt, the British, they got frightened. Even they said that this was the first most important uprising or the revolt from the sides of the Indians. When they had just supported this statement, being an Indian, I don't think that we should have any problem with this. The debate, however, is not yet over, as because the debate is still continuing, it's still going on, but it will continue till an agreed opinion could be arrived at. So here we have just only discussed the nature of the revolt of 1857. The most important points I'm just going to repeat once again for your betterment, children, so that you can just understand, you can just remember this portion. That the first thing is that all the peoples that did not have just participated in this movement, whereas the debate has been also aroused that you cannot just find out a single movement in all over the world that all the peoples, all the common peoples, they have just come forward, they have just supported this movement along with. This is the first point. And the second thing is that our first Prime Minister of independent India, he was Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. He has also appointed that the feudal response, he had just noticed, he had just smelt that this was not a perfectly means a great revolt or the first war of independence, as because the feudal lords, the landed magnates, they were very much disappointed, they were very much discontented with the British rule and their land policy. So that's why they had just revolted against the British, and finally ultimately it was an unsuccessful movement. And number four point is that so many peoples from the Bengal Intelligence or the Bengal groups, they had not supported the common people. Instead, they had just joined their hands with the English East India Company. So that's why they had just revoked the movement. They had just opposed the movement. They had just they did not just support the movement anyway. So on that means basis of context, we can say that this was not the first war of independence, but still the debate is continuing, it's still going on. Professor V.D. Savarkar, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, exactly, he has just called it, he has just termed that 1857's revolt was the first war of independence, and we cannot just ignore, we cannot just neglect this sentence anymore. Okay, so our next topic is attitude of the educated Bengali society towards the revolt of 1857. Bengali educated middle class. When it comes in my mind, I can think that how difficult, how dangerous they can be for the society, for the class, and for everyone. So just like that, for the British English East India Company also, it became very much beneficial, as because the Bengali educated middle class or the Bengali educated, which group is called so-called Vadralok, they also played a very vital role to defeat the Indian sepoys. Yes, they had just supported the English East India Company and their rule. According to them, it was not the maize rule, it was exactly the British they did that was correct for them. Why? Says because they were benefited by the British land policy and their instrumental policy. So that's why it was very much common to understand that English East India Company, they had just earned their vanity from the sides of the Bengali educated middle class. And how did they just react against this kind of injustice? Let's have a look. The Bengali intelligence was apathetic. What is the meaning of apathetic? Apathetic means if you are not having any kind of sympathy towards anything, towards any incident, this can be termed as apathetic. It means it is the antonyms of sympathy. To the revolt of 1857, this is such a ticklish problem that none has also been able to offer any satisfactory explanation. No one, no historian, no politician has just given the satisfactory explanation for what you can just understand that how did the Bengali intelligence, middle class or the educated Bhadralok, they had just behaved, they had just looked after this movement. The first point is that one thing that may be relevant to note that the Bengali intellectuals in the mid 18th century were very much conscious of their own interest. This is very true. They were very much conscious about their own interest. They couldn't just think beyond their own profits, so that the Indian sepoys, they had been struggling very hard against the British English East India Company, but they did not have, the educated Bengali middle class, they did not have such kind of sympathy towards them. As such, it will not be fair to say that they merely echoed the sentiments of the British rulers in taking negative attitudes towards the revolts of 1857. In case their hostile attitude towards the revolt of 1857 needs an explanation. Hostile attitude, it was a kind of violent activity towards the Indian sepoys. They did not support the Indian sepoys. That's very good. I don't have any problem with that. But why did they support the English East India Company and their misrule? Only as because they were continuously getting the the profits from the English East India Company. That's why. Yes, this is the point. As because they were benefited much by the English East India Company and their misrule. So that's why they went against the Indian sepoys. Instead, they had supported the English East India Company and their authorities and administrators. In Bengal, at Barakpur near Calcutta was the center of the initial spark of revolt of 1857. In the comment section, all the children, this is the high time for you. I'm just going to tell you that you have to just write in the comment section that when did the movement, the 1857's revolt movement, start in West Bengal, specifically at Barakpur. You have to just mention the date along with the date. This is very important. Okay. Just write in the comment section your answer. The revolt broke over the religious question that there was a conspiracy to destroy religions of the sepoys over the Enfield rifle issue. This was the tune with the cry of the Orthodox Hindus of the city of Calcutta, who had long suspected that the British were bent on destroying their own religion and caste and converting them to the Christianity. The intellectuals of Bengal who were against orthodoxy and fanaticism considered the rebel sepoys as the allies of the social reaction. Under the circumstances, the Bengal Intelligence had no option but oppose the rebellion. As because they knew it very well. The common people or the sepoys, they knew it very well that the English East India Company intentionally, deliberately, they were trying to convert their own religion from Hindu, from Muslim, from Jain, Sikh, from Buddhist to the Christianity. The Bengal middle class or the intelligentsia group, they also knew it very well that it could be very much harmful, it could be a direct threat for them, so that the British could just convert their religion from their own respective religions to the Christianity, but they could not just defy, they could not just oppose the movement, as because they were benefited by the English East India Company. That's why now. There were also socio-economic reasons for which the Bengali intelligentsia opposed the revolt of 1857. The intellectuals belonged to a middle-class, well-to-do family that had been the product of the colonial structure. Well-being family means they did not have any kind of scarcity. They did not have any kind of food scarcity, clothes scarcity, anything. They were much more rich at the time, so they did not have any problem with the English East India Company's rule. They could not have any kind of argument, any kind of complain against the English East India Company. So that's why they could easily just go forward. They could just easily go through with the English East India Company. But the common peoples, they were the worst sufferers. The economic status raised because of the trade and commerce, and the intellectual position was due to their English education. Yes, what they had just earned today, that was only because of the English education. You know, children, that in the year of 1844, when Lord Hardinge, he had just made the announcement. His announcement was the most important, vibrant wing at the time. He told that only English educated Bengali middle class will be given the extra facilities or the privileges to just get the government job. Since that time, it became so prevalent in the society. All the Bengali educated intelligentsia, Bengali middle class, they were just running forward to just grasp the English education. So that's why it was means very common for them to support the English education, to support the English society, to support the English East India Company, their rules, their authority, their dimension, everything. Okay. So, in the success of the revolt of 1857, they apprehended the return of old social order with all the reactionary principles and ideals, and the Bengal intelligentsia did not sympathize with the revolts of 1857. They were very much frightened. They got feared that if they support the intensifies instead of the English East India Company, their acquired, their conquered prestige or the vanity can be just gone. So that's why they had surely just fascinated with the English East India Company and their rule, and finally they had just supported the English East India Company. It has been pointed out by the Sir Binay Ghosh that the growing political consciousness of the English educated Bengali middle class also shaped their hostility towards the revolt of 1857. The educated Bengali middle class saw no hope in the revolt of 1857, thus they condemned the revolt of 1857. It means suppose race is going on in front of you. You have seen that a Lamborghini is just standing in front of you, and Maruti Omni 800 is also just Maruti Omni. It has also just taken part in that contest. You know it very well that the Lamborghini will definitely just win in this contest. So if someone says you that will you support Lamborghini or this Maruti Omni, I think if you're intellectual, if you are brilliant, if you're having the wisdom, so at the time you will definitely support the Lamborghinis because it's so fast, isn't it? So that's why the same thing was happened. The educated Bengali middle class or the Bhadralok intellectual intelligentsia, they also knew it very well that there is no hope. There is no hope for the Indian side, for the Indian sepoys. They will just never gain anything. It will not just gain any momentum in this movement. So that's why they became quite just reluctant to support this movement. Instead, they had supported the English East India Company, as because here the English East India Company was the Lamborghini, whereas the Indian sepoys, they were the Maruti Omni or the ambassador. So that's why they did not support this movement. Instead, they had supported the English East India Company. So this was the poster. This was the attitude of the educated Bengali middle class during that time. We Indians are quite unfortunate to say that the 1857's revolt was unsuccessful. And how could it become successful, children? As because whereas the Indian peoples, they did not support this movement wholeheartedly from their sentiments, from their hearts. So that's why the English East India Company, they just got a reed to suppress this movement. You can just see the casualties in this movement, as because the movement was ruthlessly suppressed, quote unquote. I'm just going to repeat once again that the movement or the revolt was ruthlessly suppressed by the English East India Company at the time because of the betrayer. So we just only say that Mir Jafar, he was only the betrayer, but the educated Bengal intelligence or the middle class, they also played the role just like Mir Jafar in Bengal, as in they did not support the sepoys. Instead, they had supported the English East India Company and their misrule. So for today, up to this, just stay tuned with us. We'll just upload the videos periodically, as because the lockdown situation is just going on. It is just continuing. We don't know whether it will be just everything all right after 3rd May or not, but still then stay home, stay happy, and don't just step outside of your door. Stay home, stay safe. Till then, good luck. Bye.